The morning sun painted golden stripes across the mahogany desk where Robert Chen sat, reviewing quarterly reports. At 52, he'd built Sterling Industries from a small import business into a company with 400 employees. The view from the 43rd floor still amazed him sometimes, the city spread out like a promise below. His assistant, Margaret's voice came through the intercom, hesitant. "Mr. Chen, there's a situation." Before he could respond, his office door opened. Margaret stepped in, and beside her stood a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with blonde curls that caught the morning light and wide blue eyes that held equal parts worry and determination. She wore a tiny apron over her blue-collared shirt, and in her small hands, she clutched a wrinkled tissue. Robert stood slowly, his businessman's composure faltering. "I'm sorry." "Sir," Margaret began. But she insisted. "Mom's sick, so I came instead," the little girl announced. Her voice clear despite the tremor in it. Robert felt something shift in his chest. He'd been expecting the cleaning supervisor, Elena Martinez, for their monthly meeting. Elena had worked for his company for 7 years, always punctual, always thorough. Never once had she missed their standing appointment. He walked around his desk and knelt down, bringing himself to the child's eye level. His knees protested, a reminder of age and too many hours at a desk, but he ignored it. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Sophie," she said, then added with careful pronunciation, "Sophie Marie Martinez. It's very nice to meet you, Sophie. I'm Robert." He paused, studying the worry etched on her young face. "Can you tell me about your mom?" Sophie's lower lip quivered slightly. "She's got a really bad cold. She was coughing all night. I heard her." She looked down at the tissue in her hands. "She was crying this morning because she didn't want to miss work. She said you count on her." Robert felt his throat tighten. In all his years of running this company, of negotiating million-dollar contracts and managing hundreds of people, he'd never felt quite like this. Humbled by the loyalty of someone he'd barely taken time to know beyond friendly morning greetings. "Margaret," he said softly, "could you bring us some hot chocolate? And maybe those cookies from the board meeting?" After Margaret left, Robert settled into the chair beside his desk and gestured to the other one. Sophie climbed up, her legs dangling well above the floor. She placed her tissue carefully on the armrest. "Sophie, I need to ask you something important," Robert said. "How did you get here?" "The bus," she replied matter-of-factly. "Mama takes it every day." "I know which one." "Number 47. Robert's heart clenched. This tiny girl had navigated city buses alone, driven by nothing but the knowledge that her mother needed help. He thought of his own daughter, Catherine, now grown and living across the country with her own family. He'd missed so much of her childhood, always busy, always working. "That was very brave," he said carefully, "but also dangerous. Does your mom know you're here?" Sophie shook her head and tears began to well in her eyes. She was sleeping. "The medicine makes her sleepy. Abuela, that's my grandma. She watches me usually, but she's visiting Aunt Rosa in Texas. Mama was so worried about missing work." Her voice broke. "I thought I could help." Margaret returned with hot chocolate and a plate of cookies. Robert watched Sophie wrap her small hands around the warm mug, seeking comfort. "Sophie," Robert said gently, "we need to call your mom. She's probably very worried by now." "She doesn't know yet," Sophie whispered. "But she will soon. She always checks on me when she wakes up." Robert thought for a moment, then made a decision. "Margaret, could you get Elena Martinez's personal file? I need her address and phone number. And call Dr. Patel. Tell him I'm sending someone over who needs attention today. No appointment necessary. Then arrange for my car and driver." Over the next hour, Robert Chen did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He left the office in the middle of a workday for a personal matter. With Sophie buckled safely in the back seat of his car, they drove to a modest apartment building in a neighborhood he rarely visited. Though many of his employees called it home, Elena answered the door in her bathrobe. Her face flushed with fever, her eyes wide with shock and then horror as she saw Sophie. "Mia!" she gasped, pulling her daughter into her arms before dissolving into a fit of coughing. She looked up at Robert, mortification washing over her features. Mr. Chen, I am so sorry. I don't know what. Please, Robert said gently, holding up his hand. May I come in? The apartment was small but immaculate. Children's drawings decorated the refrigerator. A photograph on the wall showed Elena in a graduation gown, Sophie as a baby in her arms, no father in sight. Robert understood then, perhaps for the first time, the weight this woman carried alone. Elena sat heavily on the couch. Sophie curled against her side. I should have called, Elena said hoarsely. I was going to come in. I always come in. I didn't want to let you down. Elena, Robert said, taking a seat in the chair across from them. Do you know what I saw this morning? I saw a little girl who rode the city bus alone because she loves her mother so much. I saw loyalty that most companies would kill for, but I also saw something that troubles me deeply. Elena's face fell. I saw, Robert continued, his voice soft, that I've created a workplace where someone feels they can't take a sick day, where someone would risk their health and unknowingly risk their child's safety because they're afraid. No, sir, it's not. Please, let me finish. Robert leaned forward. I've spent 30 years building a successful company. I've made a lot of money. I've won awards. But somewhere along the way, I forgot something my own father taught me. He paused, remembering the small restaurant his immigrant father had run, where employees were treated like family. He said that how you treat people when they're struggling tells you everything about who you really are. Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks. You're going to see my doctor today? Robert said firmly but kindly. My driver will take you. And then you're going to take the rest of this week off. Paid, of course. When you come back, we're going to have a conversation about your role in this company. Someone with your dedication and judgment should be doing more than supervising the cleaning crew. We have an opening in facilities management. It comes with better hours, better pay, and sick days you can actually use. Elena couldn't speak. She just nodded, crying openly now. Robert stood to leave, then paused. Sophie, thank you for teaching me something important today. What did I teach you? The little girl asked, puzzled. That the people who work hardest are often the ones who ask for the least. And that's something I should have been paying attention to all along. 3 months later, Robert Chen stood in the company cafeteria during the annual Employee Appreciation Lunch, an event he'd just instituted. Elena Martinez, now the facilities operations manager, stood at his side, healthy and glowing with confidence in her new role. I want to tell you a story, Robert announced to the assembled employees, about the day a 5-year-old girl taught a 52-year-old CEO what really matters. He told them about Sophie's brave journey, about the loyalty he'd taken for granted, about the changes he was making, better sick leave policies, childcare assistance, educational support programs. He watched the faces around him, people he'd worked alongside for years but never really seen. That evening, Robert called his daughter Catherine. Dad? She answered, surprise in her voice. He rarely called just to talk. I wanted to tell you something, he said. I'm sorry I wasn't there more when you were growing up. I was building a career, building a company, but I missed building memories with you. There was a long pause. Dad, where is this coming from? Someone reminded me recently what matters most. I can't get back those years with you, but I can try to do better now, and I can make sure other parents don't make the same mistakes I did. As Robert looked out his office window that night, the city lights twinkling below, he thought about Sophie's small voice. Mom's sick. So I came instead. Such simple words, such profound impact. He'd spent decades measuring success in dollars and contracts, in expansion and profit margins. But sitting across from a frightened little girl with a tissue in her hand, he'd finally understood the measure that mattered most. How we treat each other when the world isn't watching. How we honor the people who show up every day to do the work that keeps our lives running smoothly. Robert picked up his phone and sent a text to Elena. How's Sophie doing with her reading? The response came quickly. Better every day. She wants to read you the story she wrote about a brave little girl who helped her mama. Maybe next week? I'd be honored, he typed back, and for the first time in a very long while, Robert Chen felt like he was finally building something that would truly last, not a company, but a legacy of kindness passed from one generation to the next, starting with a little girl in an apron who'd taught him that the smallest voices sometimes carry the biggest truths. Outside his window, the city lights continued their eternal dance, but now Robert saw them differently. Each light was a home, a family, a story of people.